All right, we've talked about extreme programming's values and its principles. Um, and you can kind of see the way that with all this emphasis on those things, extreme programming can be something that's kind of hard to hold on to. It's like, well, okay, that's all good, but what is it I'm supposed to do? So the values become real when we look at the practices. All right. Um, But the idea is to remember is that as you do the practices, that you're supposed to be thinking about the principles and the values of the process. That you're not supposed to do the practices just by rote, in isolation. They need to sort of be your expression of the extreme programming values, which can be a little bit tricky. But again, I think if you remember back to Scrum and what's been going on with your teams, that just going through these processes, yeah, you're getting your software done. But it's so much more effective when the team truly believes in this notion of collective commitment and self-organization. That's the way that we work, and we're going to be a successful team by doing this. As opposed to, yeah, we have to have a stand up and blah blah blah. I'll do some work and the more we function as a team and believe in these things, the better it works. And the same is true, basically, extreme programming. So let's look at the practices, though. This gives you something actually concrete to think about with regard to. And by the way, these are the primary practices of extreme programming. There are more than this, but these are the primary practices. So the first one is the idea of sitting together. And this is absolutely something that's just like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not in Scrum. That's certainly not in Waterfall. And in fact, it's not mentioned in Kanban. Now, it is because it's a practice, you could apply it to any methodology that you're working on with your teams. Now, so his notion is that, and if you think back, this ties back to the team notion of communication. That when you're working together in the same space, the communication between people is going to be amplified. Someone can say, I need some help, and someone can come over and help them. Or someone says, I got a question about this. Or you can quickly grab someone and go over to a whiteboard on the side of the room and sketch things out. All sorts of things that by working in the same space, increase the rate of communication. Now, as anyone also knows, that's going to increase the rate of interruption. It doesn't make sense to force everyone to have themselves, we're all going to work together all the time. And before you know it, everyone feels like they need to actually go and wear headphones. Please leave me alone. I want to be isolated. I don't want to be bothered by you. Well, now you're not having communication anymore. So to sort of strike a balance, what he really talks about is that you still, you have to have private spaces available as well. And the idea, though, is put this private spaces near to the group working space. He gives even the model, by the way, that you could even have, offices, and then in the center of the offices is a communal workspace. So people can basically, when they need to get away, they can go to their office and they can close the door. They can also come out and work together. Or the idea being that you basically, you have set hours where the team works together, but these are limited, so maybe, we agree as a team that, we've got, from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, we're working as a team, and maybe we start off, with some sort of stand-up or something, who knows. And then, but, people who want, you got things to do, you can work alone before that time and you can work alone after that time. But we're going to be together, working together and communicating, during this set period of time. So he finds that to be a really important thing, and often he can solve lots of problems with teams once he gets them together so that that increases their rate of communication. He has this practice called whole team. It seems tied back to me almost back to the diversity principle, but what his point here is that you need the right mix of people. And so this is basically, you need them with the skills, maybe you need a customer representative there, someone to represent things. You can't solve and have a good team unless you've got the right people together on that team. And in fact, in 342, I would say that's sort of what we've done when we form these teams. A lot of people have said, they said, oh, I'm on a team with random teammates. You're not actually on a team with random teammates. If you recall, again, I asked for people for information about their programming experiences and ability. I asked for people about their project management experience and other things. And I've tried to form groups that have a mix of all that stuff so that there are some people in every group who are strong in different suits so that the whole team has a whole mixture of skill sets and abilities, rather than, it's just all a bunch of people who know how to program. Oh, but no one knows, you got any experience with project management. We need that mix to be successful. Create an informative workspace. Now, you're all working remotely right now, but or in cases where you are working remotely, this is a little bit trickier. But and same thing with the sit together, by the way, if you're all remote, is a little tricky. But the informative workspace idea is that you're going to have on the walls surrounding the workspace, you're going to put up things like that user story map and other sorts of things that the stories and stickies and all sorts of stuff, so that even as you're sitting there, when you go to look away from your computer monitor, oh, yeah, I see what's going. As you walk around the room or you walk to your office, you see what the current status of the project is. It's constantly reminding you of the project and its status. It's radiating information towards you about the project. And so utilize that space. Make it evident and clear. Have energized work. What does that mean? As a practice, it very simply is overworking yourself is counterproductive. So you need to be of a fresh mind and body to be doing this hard creative work. It's kind of like overtraining in athletics. Yeah, you got to push yourself to develop and grow. But if you push yourself relentlessly, eventually you'll break your body down and you'll injure yourself. And you've done yourself no good. You will set yourself back. And so the same thing is with work here. And so he's really big on that. If we want a team to continually be successful, we need to find a way for an even flow of work. We need people to be able to have the time so that they can shut off, they can go home. We don't have them working late. We don't have them working weekends. We don't have them, putting in excessive hours. It doesn't work. So we need to stay energized while we're working, which means we need to have the appropriate time off. We can't just put in 80 hours week after week or something like that. We got to be reasonable about it. One of his practices is pair programming, and I would say largely this is where pair programming came from, was extreme programming. We've already talked about it, I'm not going to talk about it in more detail, but it's probably the thing actually I would say is most associated with extreme programming, and it's the thing that people have pulled and copied. His book gives a lot of details about pair programming and the philosophy and the way to do it, a lot more actually than we have talked about, again, because it's such a critical part to the extreme programming. And again, this ties into, the communication aspect and so forth and so on. Yeah, a lot of those values, I think, show up in the pair programming. And pair programming is like the principle of redundancy. We have two people looking over things, working on things at once. Stories. Stories comes from extreme programming. Taken by Scrum and other methodologies. And he very nicely, he calls them, I like this, units of customer visible functionality. So we're going to describe what the work that we're going to do with these stories, which is, this is what the customer can actually see. That's a story. And in fact, he stresses, and this is so different than so much of the language nowadays about stories with, when this happens and blah, blah. No, his thing is, look, what you're going to do for your stories is you're going to put them on a card. You're going to have a good short title, plus some written description. So he doesn't care how you write your description, but you need a written description. And his other thing, though, is you go ahead and you slap some sort of estimate on there. So he doesn't use story points. He uses time. I think that's probably dating partly back to the time period where, but also Scrum is very big on the story points and the velocity and so forth. And so extreme programming doesn't make use of that. But he wants to see people put estimates on things really quickly so that we can start to understand the size of all of this work. Again, that comes back to the economics aspect, that the sooner we get things done, the better. We need to know what really is the cost of all these proposals. Then moving on is the weekly cycle. And this is really neat. So there are not sprints, so to speak, in extreme programming, other than thinking that, in fact, the default is a 1-week sprint. So this is sort of built in that we're going to be working 1 week at a time. And it has a nice flow to it, actually. He prefers to have his week start on Monday. Now, some teams, he says, start them on Wednesday, and he doesn't actually like that. But he understands why they want to do it, because, Mondays are bad, so let's start the week on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. But he starts them on a Monday, and you start off your weekly cycle with, you do a review of the progress to date. So where are we at? What's been going? What's been working? Whatever. It's not an explicit retrospective. I suppose you could hold one, but you come back from the weekend. Where are we at? What's our status? Where's the project at? And then the customer, and he doesn't talk about a product owner or anything. And again, this comes from, I believe, the idea that, a customer is actually part of the team, or the team is at the customer's site, So the customer, but you could, if you needed to, I suppose, replace that with something like a product owner. So he's got the customer picks a week worth of stories. How do you determine what a week's worth of stories are? Again, I suppose the team comes to find some way to do that. But extreme programming doesn't get down to the details of, we're going to keep track of points, we're going to have a velocity. It's just, we trust you that you know that you're going to have some way to pick a week's worth of stories. But it's the customer who figures this out. And then you go, much like we have been doing, you break up the stories into tasks. But then he has team members sign up for the tasks that they plan to do, and they estimate how long each of those tasks are going to take. Basically, this principle of responsibility, accepted responsibility. So yeah, I'm going to do these tasks. These are mine. Now, he does say that some teams actually handle the tasks differently. They create a big stack of the tasks, and they actually say, you know what? All right, we're just going to take and hand out the tasks to people. Yep, you got to take the task. And then when you're done with your task, you take the next one on the stack. And these teams are forcing the notion that, you know what? There's no cherry picking of tasks. You get whatever is next. And again, while maybe you're going to have trouble with that task, well, that's often where pair programming is going to come into play. And so maybe you'll pair with someone who actually has some expertise to actually help you get through and get that task done. So there's a different philosophy. Now this is at the start of the week, okay? And he says that early on, teams who aren't very good at extreme programming might find themselves spending, half a day to even a whole day just planning and figuring out that stuff. And he's like, no, once we're really good at it, you might be done like in an hour or something. We really move quickly once you're a top-notch extreme programming team. Then the team, after they've picked out their stories, broken them into tasks, assigned them, estimated whatever, how long they're going to take. Then the team works together, and everyone is busy writing automated tests that are going to be able to be run when the stories are completed. So they don't get working on the stories; they get working on the tests. And this is the notion of they're writing user acceptance criteria tests, and they're not writing manual ones. They're all automated. So extreme programming is all about automated testing. We're going to do test-driven development. It's a core principle of it, practice that they employs. But we start off and we're going to do automated tests. And he says, well, when I first wrote my first version of the book back in 1999, he actually said, well, we write code and then we write tests. And then he realized, that's not what we want to do. We really want to do the tests first. So that's something that has actually changed over time, which is interesting. But yeah, the team then, can imagine how much communication that's going to take. Well, it's really going to look like this in the design, and the page is going to be like this, and this is going to work. So that to be able to write that test, to write those tests ends up meaning you basically as a team work together to really design the heck out of how is that story going to look and work, because there's no way that you can figure out how to test it until you really know how that story behaves. I ain't even talking about like, oh yeah, we're going to fill in the fields of this form. Well, what are those fields of the form? Well, the test is going to drive that you actually end up with the design. And so you're like, all right, then you've got the test built, you know what the design is then, and then you sit down and you implement the code. So the next step is to implement and get the tests passed. And he notes that he basically says, a proper team has a mentality that they're actually working to be sure that they're getting their whole stories working, not just passing tests. Okay, so the tests can never be totally 100% complete. So you don't you don't cheat by, I got the test passed, but it's not really the whole story. They're definitely working to get the whole story done, with the goal being that this means that they're going to have deployable software. So a whole story means it's deployable software. You know, by the end of day Friday. All right, with the idea being that, you know, once you do this, so your goal is you start the week off, you pick out the work, you write these tests that causes you to come up with this great design. You've got it all planned out, you implement it, you pass your tests. It's the whole thing. You're able to get it, you know, this is new, valuable software deployed to the customer, and you're done Friday, and you're done. Your weekend is yours. No feeling of I got more stuff to do. I gotta work this weekend. I'll fit a few hours in. What are you gonna do? If you've really the idea is, you guys, you came in on Monday, you figured out a reasonable set of work to do, and you figured out, you got it all done. And now we're free. We don't have anything else to talk about. We're just focused on our software, and we did this, you know, they don't call them sprints, but you basically did a sprint, another iteration of your software. Take it off, come back Monday fresh, dig in it again. I really like that perspective. Definitely, I like that. All right, so that's the weekly story. The weekly cycle. We have to continue on. We have many more practices to extreme programming. And the next one is a quarterly cycle. So the quarterly cycle just simply means that on the quarter, you go and you do larger planning, you plan out more, what we really think that's going to happen in the total quarter with regard to the stories. You do more reflection on how the team is doing, sort of bigger retrospectives or something along those lines. Again, I don't ever hear the word retrospective in reading extreme programming, but that's the idea. All right. Talks about this notion of Slack, and he does not mean the communication tool. What he means is that when you put together that weekly cycle, you should actually include a bunch of minor tasks that can be dropped. I'm not quite sure how this plays out if everything is tied to the stories and you're trying to get the stories all done. But I suppose what it is that there's always other tasks that need to be done, other things that people know, but they're not that important. But you throw them in there and they've been estimated and someone has signed up that they're going to do them. But if push comes to shove, you can push them to the side and not really get them done for the week. He wants there to be slack. So basically there's work picked and planned for the week, but there's always work in that. So that's all, we should be able to get this all done. We all estimated it, but we know that we can choose not to do some of it. Whereas Scrum has a much more of a mindset, which is we're going to work to calibrate and have good estimates so that we always pick a reasonable set of work that should be able to get done within the sprint. There's two different philosophies. I feel like Slack, it reminds me a bit of always having buffer in a waterfall methodology. Oh yeah, we got this buffer. So it's almost like you should be saying, I know it's a 5-day week, but plan as though you only have 4 days to get things done. That way you'll be able to get done in time. There's something that feels a little weird about that to me. All right. Practice number 10 is that you should have a 10-minute build. So this is for large projects. Your builds don't take 10 minutes. But the idea would be, do what you need to do to get everything automated to build the software such that it gets done within 10 minutes. Such that there's not too much waiting to find out, does it build, what's actually happened. He's kind of this gives you enough time to go get a coffee, think about a few things, reflect upon some stuff, and find out how the build went. If it goes faster than that, he's like, you don't have time for your coffee. And then if it takes too long, then you're just wasting all this time. So, but the real idea is your build can't take too long. Otherwise, you're also likely not to do it often enough. So get that build automated to the point that you'll actually keep doing it, which really starts to be part of the foundation of continuous integration. So we should always be working to get all of our code as a team integrated with each other and making sure that it's always working. Integration is one of these really big problems in software. Continuous integration, we can have basically builds happening multiple times a day, reporting their status to us. We can build fully automated sort of continuous integration systems. But at the simplest level, the most basic form of continuous integration is we did a daily build. We made sure that we could build the software every day based upon what's in the main branch of our system. That's like the basic notion of continuous integration. There are many more fancier and more intense versions of automating continuous integration. Principle number 12 is test first programming or test-driven development. A critical thing coming out of extreme programming. Number 13 is the idea of incremental design. And, to design for now, what the problems are here, what you really have now, not so much as let's build all this stuff with some view to the future, but what really is the problem now? And let's design what we need, and then next week we'll add to that design. We might have to refactor a little bit, but we strive to keep things really simple and design for what the problem that we see now is. Do it bit by bit, not we're going to just design everything. So this is really sort of the iterative approach to design. All right. So now we've seen extreme programming. We've got its values, its principles, and its practices. You kind of get this feeling. You're going to, extreme programming in its essence values the team and communication and respect. And Kent Beck is really striving to find a way that the people work together well. And that then drives things like we're going to sit together. But it's also got all sorts of other aspects to it, like the pair programming, test-driven development. We're going to do these weekly cycles. We're going to use stories and so forth and so on. So a lot of ideas from extreme programming have permeated out to many of the other agile practices, other agile processes. There's a lot good that's good here. I think it's probably safe to say it's not the most popular thing, but you could I think what you're going to see is when you go to a team, you're going to actually go, well, that's sort of a Scrum extreme programming hybrid. They're going to do things like they're certainly using stories and probably pair programming and test-driven development and continuous integration. They're going to have work environments where they certainly get together. They're going to have informative workspaces and there's so many of these ideas that people borrow and use them. And they started to a large extent here in extreme programming. When we see them, though, it's important to remember that they are sort of the expression of the values of extreme programming. So it doesn't do any good to just pair programming unless you're actually believing in things such as communication, respect, and so forth and so on. That those are you have these important values to your team, and they get expressed through doing the practice at hand.